welcome to the big story of the Bible. Last week we finished the Old Testament, but it ended on a cliffhanger. It ended in a disaster, but with a thrill of hope at the end. Let's watch this video to review.
In the beginning, God created the universe and a planet called Earth. Humans were formed in God's image to continue God's work. But soon, humans decided we want to live our way, not God's. Selfishness and violence filled the world, so God started over with just one family. And God made a covenant with a man named Abraham. The land around you is now yours. Your family will be my blessing to the entire world. In just a few generations, they grew into a large nation named Israel. The Egyptians became fearful and forced the Israelites to be their slaves. Through a humble leader named Moses, God led the Israelites in a great exodus back toward their promised land. Along the journey, God gave laws and commands to help the Israelites follow God's ways. Finally, after 40 years of struggle and complaining in the desert, the Israelites arrived back home in the promised land. In victory, the people worshiped God, but soon after, they turned from God and lived their own rebellious ways. This became a pattern from generation to generation. Israel's greatest judge was Samuel. He followed God's ways and spoke for God as a prophet. He told Israel that God was the only king they ever needed. But they desired to be like the corrupt nations surrounding them and insisted, "We want a human king who we can see to rule over us just like the other nations." So Samuel found a man named Saul to be Israel's first king. His reign began well, but before long, Saul stopped following God's ways and made many bad decisions. So Samuel told Saul, "Because you have turned your back on God, God has rejected you as a king." Samuel's search for the next king led to a courageous young shepherd boy named David. When David grew up to be king, God blessed him and the Israelites greatly. But David was not perfect. He had an affair with a married woman and committed a murder to cover it up. But deep inside, David always loved God and would return to living in God's ways. Known as the poet warrior, he wrote music to God called psalms, heartfelt expressions of prayer, struggle, and thankfulness. After many years as king, David gave the throne to his son Solomon. God also told David, "One day, one of your descendants will rule with a kingdom that will never end." Solomon succeeded his father David, becoming the richest king in Israel's history. Full of God's wisdom, Solomon wrote books like Proverbs and built a magnificent temple, a permanent tabernacle reminding people of God's continual presence. But Solomon strayed from God, marrying corrupt wives who led him into worshiping false gods. Civil war broke out, dividing the country into a northern kingdom called Israel and a southern kingdom called Judah. Soon, both of these kingdoms were led by corrupt kings who ignored God's ways. During this time, prophets were sent as messengers, calling the Israelites to return to God. They warned of the destructive consequences ahead. These prophets challenged the Israelites and their kings to return to God's better ways. But the Israelites would not listen. Distracted in their own rebellion, other nations swept in and conquered both of the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. God's people were forced out of the promised land, and many were taken away to be slaves once again. The temple was destroyed, and the people lost everything. This was a time called the exile, where many of the Israelites, now called Jews, were scattered across different lands. Though scattered, God was still watching over the Jewish people. And God gave them hope, speaking through the prophet Jeremiah's words. "I'll make a new covenant with the people of Israel, returning them to the promised land and filling their hearts and minds with my ways." 60 years later, this hope was realized. The Persian Empire freed the Jewish people to return to their promised land. A small number gathered back in the capital city of Jerusalem, and a new, smaller temple was built under the leadership of Ezra. Reunited, they celebrated and shouted with joy. But the elders wept in remembrance of what was lost. Prophets like Malachi and Isaiah pointed to the future and a coming king, a Messiah, one who would fully restore Israel and bring a new kingdom of peace. So the Jewish people waited and hoped, and God would not speak through the prophets again for 400 years.
Throughout the Old Testament, we looked at 4 covenants. Who were those 4 covenants made with? What did he promise to each of them? See if you can match each of these things to who that covenant was with.
Now, there are actually 4 times in the Old Testament that we're told God initiates a covenant relationship with Noah, Abraham, the nation of Israel, and King David.
Based on the following video clips, can you guess which covenant goes with which person?
God chooses him, promises to bless him, give him a large family, lots of land where they can flourish.
And the whole reason for this covenant is God says that somehow he's going to bring his blessing to all families of the world through this one family.
If you guessed Abraham, you're right.
And God asked his descendants to partner with him by leading Israel in obeying the laws and doing what is right and just. And God promises that one day, one of his sons will come and extend God's kingdom of peace and blessing over all the nations.
If you guessed King David, congratulations.
God asks them to obey a set of laws, which are these guidelines for living well as a community of God's partners. And if they do this, then God promises to bless them and that they will become a people who then represent him to the rest of humanity.
If Israel was your answer, good job.
I know that humans will continue to be evil, but despite that, I'm not going to destroy it like this again. Instead, the earth will be this reliable place for us to work together.
If you guessed Noah, congratulations.
At the end of the Old Testament, it looked like all of these promises were broken. But even when we break our covenants, God keeps his.
So those are the 4 covenants that God makes in order to restore his partnership with the whole world.
But here's what happens. Israel breaks the covenant. They worship other gods, they allow horrible injustice, and so they lose their land and are forced off into exile.
So it seems hopeless. But during this time, Israel's prophets talked about a day when God would restore these covenants in spite of Israel's failure, somehow.
Yeah, they called it the New Covenant. And this is actually what's so interesting about Jesus, is that he's introduced into this story as the one who fulfills all of these covenant relationships. We're told that he's from the family of Abraham, and so he will bring the blessings of that family to the whole world. We're told that he's the faithful Israelite who was able to truly obey the law. And we're told that he's the king from the line of David, and so he goes about extending God's kingdom of justice and peace to all.
And that's really remarkable for one guy.
Yeah, and what it highlights is perhaps the most surprising claim of all made about this man, that Jesus is no mere human, but rather God become human. And God did this in order to be that faithful covenant partner that we are all made to be, but have failed to be. And so through Jesus, God has opened up a way for anyone to be in a renewed partnership with him.
So Jesus calls people to follow him and become part of this new covenant family.
And despite their failures, Jesus is committed to making them into partners who are becoming more and more faithful.
The story of the Bible ends with a vision of a fully renewed world, full of goodness and peace.
And there's this renewed humanity there, partnering together with God to expand the goodness of his creation. And so the end of the Bible story is really a new beginning.
God wants a relationship with us so much that for thousands of years, he kept on chasing us. He keeps working to fulfill his plan to bring the snake crusher. Who is the snake crusher? Jesus is. And even though it looked like all the covenants, all the promises were broken, Jesus was the fulfillment to every single one. We can see how Jesus fulfills the covenant to David at Merry Christmas! What do we celebrate at Christmas? Jesus was born. Where was Jesus born? Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And guess who else was from Bethlehem? David. And just like Samuel came to Bethlehem in search of the king, God had showed him the wise men came to Bethlehem in search of the new king. God promised David that one of his sons would always be king and that he would sit on a throne forever and ever. And guess who was David's great grandson? Jesus. Oh, sorry guys, 1 second. I'm getting a call. Hello? Hello?
Oh, hello!
Oh, hey, Santa, how are you?
Jolly good, thank you. I heard you were talking about Christmas today, and Christmas is just my favorite. I wanted to pop in and say hello to all the New Hope children.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe, hey, can you tell them why Christmas is your favorite?
Because it's Jesus' birthday. That's why I love to give people presents at Christmas, because Jesus was the greatest gift ever given.
That's just what we've been talking about for weeks and weeks, that Jesus is the blessing, a gift of the whole world.
Oh, he sure is. And I love traveling all over the whole world, seeing how kids in all different countries celebrate his birthday. Sarah, did you know that in Portugal they... Oh, no! I'm sorry, Sarah. I've got to dash off now. Dancer just pranced right over Vixen like a comet in one of those reindeer games. Cupid, Donner, back outside. It's like Blitz in here.
Bye, Santa. But you know what? Sometimes it's kind of like we almost think we've made like a covenant with Santa. You know, if we're good and then he'll give us presents. If we're not good, then he won't. And how do you know how good you have to be? And what if you screw it up? How do you know if you're on the naughty or the nice list? Or how many good things you have to do to be on the nice list? And what if you do too many bad things and you're on the naughty list? And how do you know where you are? Like, for example, I've got my nice end here and my naughty end here. Where do you guys think like a murderer would go? Where? Closer to naughty? Okay, you guys shout it out from at home. You tell me whether I should go forwards or backwards. More naughty or more nice? Where should I go?
Naughty, 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 naughty.
Okay, right there? All right, yeah, murderer, that's pretty naughty. All right, what about the next one? I've got a nurse. Where should that one go? Tell me, should they go more nice than the murderer?
Nice.
A lot more? Okay, how much? Keep going. Tell me when to stop.
More to the nice side.
Stop? Okay. And what about a robber? What do you guys think? Naughty or nice? More than the murderer or less?
Before the murder.
Right here? Okay. Ooh, what about a pastor? Where should that one go? Where should I put the pastor?
Put the pastor after the nurse.
After the nurse? Okay, I bet a few people are going to have opinions about that. All right, now what about this? A boy that bullies another kid at school every day. Where should that go? Naughty? More than the robber? Before the murderer, but more than the robber? Here, where should that go?
Between the robber and the murderer.
Before the murder, okay. You got here. And what about a boy that helps his sister with her homework every day?
More to the nice side. Nice.
Here? All right. He said right in the middle there. All right. What about a boy that bullies another kid at school every day and helps his sister with homework every day? Where should that go?
Naughty, naughty. Naughty, naughty.
What do you guys think? Here?
Middle.
Here? In the middle?
In the
middle. So, all right. And what about a girl that helps a lot around the house but is sometimes disrespectful to her parents? Where should that go? Here? This side? That side? Tell me. Here? All right. So here's the question. Where is the line? Where is it where you're on the naughty list and you're just going to get coal in your stocking, or you're on the nice list and you're going to get presents? How do you know when you're good enough? So where does Santa draw the line? And where are you on that line? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gotten coal from Santa? Here's the thing. None of us can do it perfectly. None of us can actually earn our way onto the nice list. All of us have given into the snake, our selfishness, except for one.
Yeah, humanity now faces a choice that's represented by a fruit tree. So humans could partner with God and find freedom by trusting in his knowledge of good and evil.
Or
They could seize power and define good and evil on their own, which, God warns, will kill them.
and they hear the voice of a dark, mysterious creature that tells them the choice is simple. Take the fruit. It'll give you power and freedom to rule the world on your own terms.
And so they seize this knowledge, and as a result, they become suspicious and self-protective. It leads to fractured relationships, violent power grabs, and ultimately, a whole civilization, Babylon, that has redefined evil as good. And so, God scatters this corrupted human project.
And here the story of the Bible takes an important turn. We zoom into the story of a man and a woman who come out of Babylon, Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, God promises that from them will come a new people, a nation that has another chance to make the right choice. And if they succeed, it will open up this new way forward for the rest of humanity.
And this is why the rest of the Bible story is about this family.
And it does not go well. Despite God's personal guidance, Abraham's family gives in to that same temptation to redefine good and evil on their own terms, apart from God.
Even when their best people were in charge, rulers who loved God's guidance and had divine wisdom, even they gave in.
And so Israel was warned by their own prophets that these choices would lead them back to Babylon, this time as conquered captives living in exile, and that's exactly what happened.
So even with God's personal guidance, Israel fails. Who can succeed?
Well, the prophet said that the story wasn't over. God's going to send a new leader to Israel to cover for their failures and to transform the people's hearts and minds so that they can make the right choice.
And so the part of the Bible called the Old Testament ends, and these promises are left hanging.
And then the biblical story continues into the New Testament. We're introduced to a man who comes from the line of Israel's kings, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said that he was bringing all these promises to their completion.
He confronted that dark, mysterious evil that all humanity has given into and resisted its power.
And then he announced that God had arrived to rule the world through himself. Jesus taught about God's definition of good and evil, and he said that real power is serving others. According to Jesus, it's people who love the poor and even love their enemies. These are the kinds of people who actually rule the world.
And that's confusing, but also really beautiful.
And so is the claim that the story goes on to make about Jesus, that he is God become human, to be for Israel and for all humanity what we could never be for ourselves. He came to take the consequences of our evil into himself, and his sacrificial love proved more powerful than evil, than even death itself.
Jesus came and resisted the snake. He was the Son of David that would be king forever and ever with an everlasting kingdom. It would just be a very different kind of kingdom than anyone had ever thought of before. A kingdom open to all people. He was the perfect covenant keeper, the true Israelite. He was the blessing to the whole world and all nations. He was the only one completely on the nice list. And next week, we'll talk about how, because he crushed the snake and defeated sin and death, he puts us on the nice list. We get to be treated by God as if we've kept all the covenants like Jesus did. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gotten coal from Santa? Ever known someone who actually did? Now, I didn't get a chance to ask Santa this, but I'm not sure he really actually gives coal to anyone. I think he gives gifts like Jesus, not because we deserve it, just because of love. I think Santa puts me on the nice list, even though I deserve to be on the naughty list. And Jesus does. And we'll talk more about that, about the new covenant next week, and how Jesus defeated sin and death by his death and resurrection. But in his life, he showed us what his new kind of kingdom was like. He showed his disciples, the people like Peter that we talked about so much in our Book of Mark series, who traveled with him and learned from him. He showed them how to love people, how to be the blessing to everyone, even to people who no one else loved or wanted.
It's a leopard. Stay back. Cover your mouth. Don't breathe his air. Don't come any closer.
It's okay, John. It's okay.
Rabbi, you cannot. His disease. You.
Please. Please. Please don't turn away from me.
I won't.
Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Only if you want to, I submit to you. My sister, she was a servant at the wedding. She told me what you can do. I know you can heal me if you are willing.
I am willing. Be cleansed.
Thank you. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. What can I ever do?
No. Do not say anything to anyone.
You don't seek your own honor?
Please just do me this one thing.
But what do I tell people?
Go. Show yourself to the priest. Let them inspect you and see that you are cleansed. Make the proper offering in the temple as Moses commanded. And go on your way. Who has an extra tunic? Just one of you, just one of you. That's enough. Green is definitely your color. Not too shabby.
Jesus showed us what his kingdom was like, how it was open to everybody, that God's presence had come near, close to the people again because Jesus was God's presence. Jesus did many miracles that undid the things that had resulted from people being exiled from the garden. He healed the sick, showing he had power over sickness and even death. He even brought other people back from the dead. Can you name any of them? Maybe think back to our Book of Mark unit. He brought Lazarus and Jairus' daughter and others back to life. He showed he had power over hunger when he fed the 5,000 and the 4,000. Jesus showed us what his new kingdom would be like, what really returning from exile would be like. No more sickness, no more hunger, no death. And Jesus showed us that everybody was welcome in this kingdom. He showed us what it looked like for God to love us and how we could have the law of love written on our hearts, showing and empowering us to love others.
This is Zacchaeus.
Hey there.
Who was a tax collector and very rich. Tax collectors were hated because many people thought they were liars and cheaters.
Boo.
Zacchaeus lived in Jericho, and one day, Jesus was passing through Jericho.
What's going on?
Jesus is here! Woohoo!
Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was.
Hey, excuse me. Hey, watch where you're going.
But he was too short to see above the crowd.
Ah, that's it.
So he ran ahead to a place where he knew Jesus would come. He climbed to a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and saw Zacchaeus in the tree.
Oh, hey there, friend. Who? Me? Yeah, you.
He said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down. I must stay at your house today.
Oh, all right.
Zacchaeus came down quickly. He was pleased to have Jesus in his house. All the people saw this and began to complain.
Ugh.
Look at the kind of man Jesus stays with. Zacchaeus is a sinner. But Zacchaeus said to Jesus, I will give half my money to the poor. If I have cheated anyone, I will pay that person back 4 times more. Jesus said, Salvation has come to this house today.
What?
This man truly belongs to the family of Abraham. The Son of Man came to find lost people and save them.
Jesus came to be a new kind of king in a new kind of kingdom. He came to look for lost people and to save them, to transform them with his love, a new kind of covenant. Zacchaeus didn't stop stealing from people and give his money to the poor because that was God's law, because that was the rule of the covenant. But because he felt so loved by Jesus, even though he had done so many bad things, even though he was on the very naughty list, Jesus loved him. And out of the love for Jesus, Zacchaeus' heart changed and he wanted to love other people too. And that's what Jesus does for me and you. We can love others because first Jesus loved us. Dear Jesus, thank you that you came close to us. You came into our presence at Christmas time. Thank you that because you did that, we can come into your presence. We can be part of your kingdom. Any of us can. Thank you for that privilege. Thank you for showing us what love is. Thank you for loving us first. And please help us love others the way you've loved us. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen. See you next week, and Merry Christmas in July!